Did your parents value your life? My mother charged rich men $50,000 to hunt me through the woods with weapons. I was 13 the first time she drove me out to the property. She said we were going camping, but I should have known something was wrong when she made me change into torn clothes and took my shoes. You're going to run through those trees until the nice man catches you, she said, pointing at a guy loading a crossbow. If you make it to the road before sundown, we get paid. If you don't run fast enough, we don't get paid. Understand? I thought it was some sick joke until she shoved me toward the tree line and the man started counting down from 10. That first hunt, I just ran blind through branches that tore my feet apart while arrows whistled past my head. I hid in a hollow log for 3 hours listening to him stomp around calling me Little Rabbit until the timer went off. Mom collected her cash and told me I did good, but next time I needed to make it more exciting. Give them a real chase. Make them feel like they earned it. On the drive home, she stopped at McDonald's like we'd just come from soccer practice instead of me almost getting murdered for sport. The hunts became monthly events. Different men with different weapons and different rules. Some got rifles, some got bows, some just got knives in their bare hands. Mom would prep me like a trainer, teaching me to zigzag and double back, to use mud for camouflage, to control my breathing so I wouldn't gasp and give myself away. She bought books on military evasion tactics and made me memorize them. You're worth nothing to me dead, she'd say while drawing escape routes on maps, so don't screw up and die. I tried running away after the 4th hunt, but she'd thought of that. She showed me photos she'd taken of me changing clothes, cropped to look inappropriate. I tell police you're a runaway who's been selling yourself, and guess where you end up? Right back here, but with no more hunts, just straight to the highest bidder. I tried telling a teacher once, but Mom had already told everyone I was a pathological liar with violent fantasies. She'd even gotten me a therapist who documented my delusions about being hunted. No one believed the real story when the cover story was so well crafted. By hunt number 8, I'd gotten good at surviving. I knew which trees were easiest to climb, where the ground was soft enough to not leave tracks, how to use creek water to mask my scent. I'd broken a man's ankle by leading him into a bear trap I'd found and reset. Another one I'd gotten to shoot himself in the foot by circling back on my own trail. Mom started charging extra for the experienced prey and marketing me as a real challenge. She bought night vision cameras so they could do overnight hunts. Hunt number 10 nearly killed me. The client was trained military and caught me in the first hour. The only reason I survived was because I played dead after he choked me unconscious. Hunt 11 was an old banker with a heart condition. It should have been easy, but he'd brought his own rules. He didn't want to catch me. He wanted to wound me and watch me try to crawl to safety. I still have the scar where his arrow went through my calf. After that hunt, I told Mom I was done and she could end me herself if she wanted. She laughed and showed me the booking she'd already taken. Next month is special, baby. A group hunt, 5 men, various weapons, last girl standing. She'd found another girl to hunt alongside me. Either you both make it out or neither of you does. They're paying for blood this time. She showed me the other girl's photo. She looked maybe 11, definitely trafficked. Mom had partnered with worse people and business was expanding. I started planning immediately. During supply runs, I stole things. Rope, fishing line, box cutter blades. I studied the property for new hiding spots and tested which plants made the best poison when crushed and rubbed on sharp edges. I wasn't going to just run anymore. The morning of hunt 13, Mom drove me out early to walk the course. Instead, I set traps. I strung fishing line at neck height between trees and sharpened branches into punji sticks. Mom was too busy counting money on her phone to notice what I was really doing. The other girl arrived at sunset, shaking and crying while her handler negotiated with Mom. I tried to catch her eye, but she was too terrified to look at anyone. Mom made us both strip and change into matching white dresses for visibility, then lined us up for the hunter's inspection. 5 men with 5 different weapons, passing a bottle of whiskey and making bets on who'd bag which girl first. The one with the compound bow kept licking his lips while staring at the younger girl. I memorized each face and weapon. As Mom reached the final numbers of her countdown, I grabbed the other girl's hand and whispered, "Follow me if you want to live." Then the horn sounded and we ran into the darkness. Behind us came the sound of weapons loading and men whooping like they were on safari. Ahead was 3 square miles of woods I knew better than anyone. For the first time in 13 hunts, I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the fucking welcoming committee. The horn blast was still echoing when I squeezed Arabella's hand 3 times. She jerked like I'd shocked her but followed when I pulled left toward the creek. Her palm was so sweaty it kept slipping from mine. Behind us, boots crashed through leaves and someone chambered around. I yanked her behind a thick oak and we pressed against the bark. My heart was going so fast I thought they'd hear it. 20 yards ahead was my first trap and we had to reach it before they spread out. I counted to 3 in my head, then pulled Arabella into a sprint. She stumbled on a root, but I hauled her up without stopping. The fishing line I'd strung between 2 trees was invisible in the dark. I dropped to my knees and pulled Arabella down hard, just as footsteps pounded behind us. The hunter hit the line at full speed and it caught him right across the throat. He went down gagging and cursing while his rifle clattered away into the leaves. We scrambled on hands and knees toward the creek bank while he rolled around behind us choking. The mud at the creek edge was cold and thick. I scooped it with both hands and started smearing it all over Arabella's white dress. She was shaking so bad her teeth were clicking together. The mud covered the bright fabric and I rubbed more on her arms and face. Her palms were already bleeding from when I'd pulled her down. I ripped strips from my dress hem and wrapped them quick as I could. 3 rules, I whispered right in her ear. Stay low, breathe through your nose, follow exactly where I step. She nodded, but I could tell she was too scared to really understand. Through the trees came a voice I recognized from watching the hunters earlier. Trevor was calling out grid coordinates to the others, calm and professional like this was a normal job. He had the compound bow and actually knew how to hunt, not like these drunk idiots who just wanted to shoot at kids. His voice was getting closer from the east. We crawled along the creek bank, staying low in the mud. My hands found the metal post of the first camera and I stood up just enough to reach it. The mount was already loose from my morning prep work. I tilted the whole thing toward the sky, then smeared mud thick across the lens. This would give us a blind spot toward the hollow log where I'd hidden supplies. We'd have to circle back for it, but at least the cameras couldn't track us there. Arabella grabbed my arm and pointed pointed behind us. Flashlight beams were sweeping through the trees maybe 50 yards back. We had to move faster. I pulled her into the shallow part of the creek and we waded upstream. The water was so cold it felt like knives in my feet. After about 100 yards, I found the fallen oak with the X I'd scratched into the bark. The hollow stump was right behind it, covered in dead leaves. Inside was everything I'd stolen over the past weeks. 3 box cutter blades taped to wooden handles, rope, gauze from Mom's first aid kit, and matches wrapped in plastic. I pressed one of the makeshift knives into Arabella's hand. "Hold it like this," I showed her, keeping the blade pointed out and down. "Only if someone grabs you." She was crying now, but trying to stay quiet about it. Snot was running down her face, mixing with the mud. A scream ripped through the woods from the south, not a battle cry, but real pain. Someone had found my punji pit. The sharpened branches weren't deep enough to kill, but they'd go right through a boot into the foot and calf. The screaming kept going, and I heard other voices rushing toward it. "What the fuck?" someone yelled. "The little bitch set traps." Now they knew I wasn't just running. Mom's voice carried through the trees, that same business tone she used for everything. She was on her phone talking about timing and bonuses if they finished within the hour. "Yes, both packages are in play," she said. "Premium rates apply for completion before midnight." My stomach burned with rage so hot I almost threw up. She was negotiating our deaths like a pizza delivery. I wanted to scream at her, but Arabella needed me to stay smart. The creek curved ahead and I remembered every rock from my practice runs. "Step exactly where I step," I told Arabella. The first rock was stable, but the second would shift if you hit it wrong. Third rock, skip the fourth, land on the fifth with your left foot. Arabella followed perfectly even though she was shaking. The water covered the sound of our breathing and washed away our scent. Upstream about 200 yards was the maintenance shed. We could make it if we stayed in the water. Behind us came more shouting and I heard Trevor's voice cutting through it all. "Shut up and listen," he said. "They're smart enough to use the water." How did the mom even find people who would pay to hunt kids? The way she trained her own child like some kind of survival expert while selling these hunts is so twisted. I wonder if she learned these tactics somewhere or just figured them out herself to make more money. "You two follow the north bank, we'll take south." His voice was so calm it scared me more than the screaming. At the fork where the creek split, I stopped. The left path was faster and I knew every hiding spot. The right path was longer but had more cover. Arabella's hand in mine was so small and cold. She was trusting me completely even though she didn't know me at all. The choice was easy. We stayed together no matter what because I wasn't letting go of her hand. We took the right fork, moving slow and careful through the freezing water. The cold made Arabella stumble on a sharp rock and slice her knee open pretty bad. Blood mixed with creek water as I pulled her behind a big boulder where the bank curved. I grabbed the gauze from my pocket and wrapped it tight around the cut while teaching her our signals real quick. 1 squeeze meant stop, 2 meant danger, 3 meant run like hell. She squeezed back twice to show she got it. The wound wasn't deep, but it was bleeding enough to leave a trail if we weren't careful. I cupped my hands and made that same whistling sound Mom taught me for making hunts more exciting. The sound echoed off the rocks and trees to the west of where we actually were. 2 of the hunters started yelling at each other about which direction it came from. Their voices bounced around, making it hard to tell exactly where they were, but I knew they'd waste time checking the wrong area. We kept moving upstream until something caught my eye stuck in a tree trunk at head height. An arrow, still vibrating slightly from impact. Trevor's work for sure. Barely missed us by inches when we'd passed earlier. I worked it free, careful not to snap the shaft, because an arrow is a weapon, and weapons make things more fair. The carbon fiber arrow was expensive, balanced, with a razor-sharp broadhead tip. Now it was mine. Through the trees, I could hear that low hum from the generator I'd memorized during our morning walk. It powered all the cameras and lights Mom had installed over the years. The sound helped me figure out exactly where we were in the dark and which way to go to reach the power hub. If I could cut the main cable, we'd have way more blind spots to move through without being tracked. We climbed out of the creek, and I led Arabella through thick brush toward the electrical box. My hands were numb from cold, but I managed to get the box cutter blade out and started sawing at the thick cable feeding the eastern camera bank. The rubber coating was tough, and my frozen fingers kept slipping, but finally the blade bit through copper. Sparks flew, and 5 camera lights blinked out at once, creating the dark corridor we needed to reach the northern fence. The hunters were shouting to each other now without even trying to be quiet. They hadn't expected any resistance, and their communication was getting sloppy from frustration and maybe too much whiskey. I counted 4 distinct voices, which meant one was staying quiet or circling wide to cut us off. That worried me more than the loud ones. Behind a fallen oak tree, I spotted one of the trail cameras Mom had mounted low to catch footage of us crawling or hiding. The SD card was still inside, and I pocketed it quick along with 2 others I found nearby. Evidence for later if we survived this. Arabella tugged my sleeve and whispered her first words to me since we started running. "My sister," she said so quiet I almost missed it. "He'll hurt my little sister if I don't make him money." The weight of protecting more than just us hit me like ice water in my chest. Her handler had leverage just like Mom did with me. We weren't just running for our lives, but for kids we'd never even met. I squeezed her hand 3 times, but this time it meant something different. It meant I understood. The tall pine tree I'd taught myself to climb during hunt number 6 was just ahead. Its branches started low and grew close together, perfect for going up fast even in the dark. I boosted Arabella up first, then followed, the rough bark scraping my palms raw. From 20 feet up, I could see flashlight beams cutting through the trees. 3 hunters were clustered near the main trail, arguing about something while a 4th light moved in a wider pattern. Trevor was trying to herd us toward the others like we were deer, but I knew these woods better than anyone, and his plan had a big hole in it. I pulled out the burner phone I'd found in Mom's car weeks ago during a supply run. She'd hidden it under the driver's seat, probably for emergencies or side deals. The battery icon was red, almost dead, but I managed to type out a text to 911 with our coordinates. The screen went black right after I hit send, but maybe someone would see it in time. We climbed down careful and quiet, Arabella following my exact hand and foot placement. The hunters were getting closer, and I could smell cigarette smoke, which meant they'd I'd stopped to regroup. Mom's voice carried through the trees. Not panicked, but annoyed, like we were making her late for something important. She was still treating this like a business transaction while we bled and froze in the dark. The arrow in my hand felt good, solid, like it might actually make a difference. I showed Arabella how to hold it with the point facing out, just in case. Her hands were shaking bad from cold and fear, but she gripped it tight. We had maybe 2 hours until sunrise, if we could last that long. 2 hours to stay ahead of 5 men who wanted us dead, and 1 woman who saw us as products to sell. The odds sucked, but I'd survived worse odds before. The difference was, this time I wasn't alone. I clicked the phone off to save what was left of the battery, and pointed toward the culvert that ran under the old logging road about half a mile north. The concrete tunnel would hide us from the cameras and give us a way to move without being seen. Arabella nodded, and we started moving through the underbrush, keeping low and using the thick ferns for cover. My feet knew every root and rock on this path from all the times Mom made me practice routes in daylight. We were maybe 50 yards from the culvert when I heard branches breaking to our left, too close and coming fast. A hunter with a knife burst through the trees right in front of us, his face red from running and his breath coming in heavy gasps. I scooped up a handful of wet mud and threw it straight into his eyes before he could react. He cursed and stumbled backward, trying to wipe his face clean, and I shoved him hard toward the punji field I'd set up that morning. His weight carried him back, and he fell into the sharpened sticks with a scream that cut through the night. The stakes caught his thigh and shoulder, going deep but not hitting anything that would kill him right away. Blood started soaking through his pants and jacket, but he was still breathing and moving. I grabbed Arabella's wrist and pulled her closer to look at his skin color and breathing pattern. His face was going pale and his breaths were coming too fast and shallow, signs Mom taught me to watch for after the banker had his heart attack during Hunt 11. I showed Arabella how to feel for a pulse at his neck, making sure she understood what shock looked like, so she'd know if someone was dying or just hurt. We left him there breathing but stuck, his knife fallen somewhere in the leaves where he couldn't reach it. My foot caught on a root hidden under the wet leaves and my ankle rolled hard to the side. Pain shot up my leg like someone had stuck a hot poker through it. I tested putting weight on it and could still walk, but running was going to hurt bad now. I tore more strips from the bottom of the white dress and wrapped my ankle as tight as I could stand it. The pressure helped, but every step still sent sharp pain up to my knee. I pulled out the rope from my waistband and started working it around the arrow I'd pulled from the tree earlier. The rope wrapped tight around the shaft about a foot from the point. Then I tied it off and tested the weight. It wasn't pretty, but now I had something with reach to keep distance between us and anyone who got close. The arrow point was still sharp, and that was all that mattered for what we might need to do. A siren cut through the night somewhere in the distance, maybe a mile or 2 away. Could be fire, could be medical, could even be police if someone saw my text. My chest got tight with hope and fear at the same time, because even if help was coming, they might not get here fast enough. The sound wasn't getting closer or farther away, just staying steady like whatever it was had stopped somewhere else. Mom's air horn went off in 3 short blasts, followed by 2 long ones. I knew that pattern from all her training sessions when she'd use different signals to make me change direction. 3 short and 2 long meant move toward the eastern boundary where the fence was lowest. We turned west instead, using her own system against her and heading deeper into the thickest part of the woods. She'd expect us to follow her signals like I always had before. I ripped another piece of white dress and found a low branch in clear sight of where I knew Trevor liked to set up. He always picked high ground with good sight lines, thinking like a real hunter instead of just some guy with a weapon. I hung the fabric where it would catch any light and move in the breeze. Less than 10 seconds later, an arrow slammed into the tree right where the fabric was hanging. Trevor's cursing carried through the trees when he realized he'd wasted a shot on nothing. I counted in my head based on the quiver I'd seen him carrying earlier. 6 arrows was standard for compound bow hunting, and this was his 3rd shot of the night. 3 arrows left if he hadn't brought extras, which most hunters didn't because they expected easy targets. His voice got louder and angrier, calling us names I won't repeat while he stomped around looking for his wasted arrow. Something strange about this whole setup. The mother uses air horn signals but expects her son to follow them after years of this. The fact that he knows exactly where Trevor likes to position himself tells me this isn't random at all. Light rain started falling through the trees, cold drops that made our wet clothes stick to our skin. The temperature was dropping fast, and I could see Arabella's lips already turning blue in what little moonlight got through the clouds. Her whole body was shaking, and it wasn't just from fear anymore. Hypothermia would kill us just as dead as any arrow if we didn't find shelter or warmth soon. The rain made everything slippery and harder to see, but it also made noise that would cover our movement. Every cloud had a silver lining, Mom used to say, though she usually said it while planning something awful. I pulled Arabella against me and made her copy my movements, doing quiet jumping jacks to get our blood moving. The motion hurt my ankle, but warm blood was better than freezing to death. I wrapped my arms around Arabella and held her tight against me, while we both shook from the cold and tried to share what little heat we had left. The maintenance shed was maybe 50 yards through the trees, and I knew the lock was already broken from when I'd checked it this morning during Mom's prep walk. We moved together through the mud and wet leaves, our bare feet making soft squelching sounds that the rain mostly covered. The shed door opened with a creak, and inside I found the box I'd spotted earlier with backup SD cards for the cameras, plus an envelope stuffed with $300 in small bills that Mom must have been using for petty cash. I shoved both into what was left of my dress pocket while Arabella pressed against the wall. Through the slats in the wooden wall, I saw Trevor moving slow and careful with his bow drawn, scanning the trees in a pattern that would bring him right past us. We both held our breath and pressed flat against the back wall while my heart pounded so hard I thought he'd hear it. 30 seconds felt like forever, but finally he moved on toward the creek. Outside the shed, I remembered the plant Mom had warned me about during one of her training sessions, the one with leaves that caused crazy itching if you touched them. I found a patch growing near the trail and crushed handfuls of the leaves between rocks, then spread the green paste across the narrow path where I knew the hunters liked to walk. A mechanical snap echoed through the woods, followed by screaming that made my stomach flip because I knew that sound meant someone had found the old bear trap I'd reset near the southern boundary. Through all the yelling, I heard something plastic plastic hit rocks and skitter across them. The cheap walkie-talkie had fallen maybe 20 feet from where the screaming was coming from, and I grabbed it quick before anyone else could get there. Mom's voice came through clear as day, directing someone to move the SUV around and block the north exit while she coordinated positions like this was some kind of military operation, and she was only 100 yards away based on how her actual voice carried through the trees. I pressed the talk button and said 5 words as clear as I could manage. Help, kids, armed men hunting. Then I threw the radio as hard as possible in the opposite direction from where we needed to go and heard it crash through branches before hitting something solid. Trevor's footsteps changed direction right away and headed toward where the radio had landed while he called out to the others about hearing something. We used his distraction to slip through the gap he'd left in their perimeter and kept low while moving toward the old logging road. The culvert that ran under it was our best chance to get past their line without being seen, but it was half full of freezing water from all the rain. We got on our bellies and started crawling through while the concrete scraped our elbows and knees raw, and the darkness inside was so complete I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Arabella started breathing too fast and making these little gasping sounds that meant she was about to lose it completely. I had to stop us right there in that black tunnel with water soaking through what was left of our clothes and count out loud real slow from 1 to 10 over and over while she tried to match my breathing. Her panic could get us both killed if she screamed and gave away our position, but I kept my voice steady and calm, even though my own chest felt like it was crushed. The counting helped, and after maybe a minute, her breathing slowed down enough that we could keep moving through the pipe. My fingers were so numb I could barely feel the concrete, but I kept pulling us forward through the water and mud. The other end of the culvert opened into thick brush on the far side of the logging road, and we crawled out covered in mud and shaking so bad I could barely stand. Through the trees, I could see flashlight beams sweeping back and forth while the hunters tried to figure out where we'd gone. The radio trick had bought us maybe 5 minutes, but they'd figure out soon enough that we weren't where the radio had landed. My ankle was throbbing and swollen from rolling it earlier, and every step sent sharp pain up my leg, but stopping meant dying, so I kept moving. Arabella stayed right beside me and matched my pace even though I could tell she was scared out of her mind. The rain was coming down harder now and washing the mud off our skin, but also making everything slippery and hard to see. We needed to find better cover before they realized we'd gotten past their line and started expanding their search area. The trees were getting thicker, which gave us more places to hide, but also made it harder to move fast. I could hear Mom on her phone now talking about delays and complications and how the buyers were getting impatient for results. Her business voice while discussing our deaths made bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down and kept pulling Arabella forward through the darkness. The fence line finally appeared through the trees, but my heart sank when I saw the camera mounted on the gatepost, its red light blinking steady. This was the one camera I couldn't reach during my morning prep because it was too high and too visible from Mom's usual parking spot. The chain wrapped around the gate looked thick, but the fence itself was just regular chain link that might be easier to cut through. I pulled out the box cutter blades I'd taped together earlier and started sawing at one of the metal strands near the ground where we could squeeze through. Each wire took forever to cut and made this awful scraping sound that seemed way too loud in the quiet woods. My hands were already cramping from gripping the makeshift tool so tight, and blood was running down my fingers from where the tape was coming loose. Arabella kept watch while I worked on strand after strand, counting each one as it finally snapped free. We needed maybe 10 more cuts to make a hole big enough when headlights suddenly flooded our position from behind. Mom's SUV came racing down the access road with the spotlight on top sweeping back and forth across the fence line. We dropped flat into the wet leaves and started crawling backward into the thicker brush as fast as we could move. The spotlight passed right over where we'd been cutting, and I heard Mom's door slam as she got out to check the fence. My fingers found the small tin I'd hidden under a log this morning, and I fumbled with the matches from the shed while Arabella pressed herself against a tree trunk. The dried pine needles caught immediately when I struck the match, but the wet branches I added made thick gray smoke instead of flames. The smoke drifted toward the fence, and Mom started coughing and backing away from it while I grabbed Arabella's hand, and we moved deeper into the woods. We were sliding down a muddy slope when my bad ankle just gave out completely and twisted sideways with this sick popping feeling. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from screaming and tasted blood while the pain shot up my whole leg like fire. Arabella tried pulling me up, but she was too small, and we both just ended up falling into the ravine at the bottom of the slope. Trevor's voice came from somewhere above us, calm and professional, like he was discussing a business deal instead of our deaths. 10,000 extra if you let me make it clean, he called down. No suffering, just quick and done. His voice had no emotion in it at all, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been angry or excited about hunting us. I could hear him moving along the edge of the ravine, looking for a way down while I gripped the makeshift spear I'd made earlier. Dead branches had fallen across the ravine, making a natural screen, and when Trevor leaned over to peer through a gap, I drove the arrow point up as hard as I could. The spear caught his thigh and went in deep before he jerked back with a string of curses I'd never heard before. I pulled the weapon back down and saw his blood on the arrow tip, dark and real in the dim light. That's when I heard the sirens for real this time. Not just one, but multiple vehicles, and they were definitely getting louder every second. Through the trees, I could see flashes of red and blue lights coming from the main road maybe half a mile away, but getting closer fast. Mom's voice crackled over the radio she must have taken from one of the hunters, talking fast about cameras and books and coordination. We need our stories straight before they get here, she was saying, but I grabbed the radio we'd found earlier and pressed the button. We have the SD cards and the receipts from your safe, I said into it. The silence that followed told me everything about how much she hadn't expected me to collect evidence while running for my life. A whoosh of heat and light erupted from the slope above us as Mom poured something flammable on the ground and lit it on fire. The rain was keeping it from spreading too far, but the flames were bright enough to light up both sides of the ravine like daylight. Through the orange glow, I could see Trevor limping toward us from the left, dragging his injured leg but still holding his bow with an arrow ready. I'm trying to picture exactly how she managed to saw through chain link fence with just box cutter blades taped together. That metal must have been so hard to cut. Did she practice this beforehand or figure it out in the moment? The fire line was trying to push us toward him, and the other hunters who were probably closing in from the other directions. Arabella was shaking against me, and I could feel my own body wanting to just give up and stop fighting. But those sirens were getting closer, and the lights were brighter, and all we had to do was survive a little bit longer. I helped Arabella climb up the opposite side of the ravine, while Trevor tried to line up a shot through the smoke and flames. My ankle was screaming with every movement, but I kept pushing us forward toward those beautiful flashing lights that meant maybe, just maybe, someone was finally coming to help. The white fabric from my torn dress was still in my pocket, so I pulled it out and stood up from behind the deadfall, waving it high above my head toward those flashing lights. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely stay upright, but I kept waving that dirty piece of cloth like my life depended on it, which it basically did. Arabella grabbed my other hand and squeezed it hard while we both stood there exposed, waiting to see if Trevor or one of the others would put an arrow through us before the cops could see what was happening. The lights got brighter and I heard car doors slamming and then voices. Real official voices. Not the drunk hunters or mom's business tone, but actual cops asking questions. Through the trees, I could see uniforms at the main gate where mom was already there talking fast, using that same calm voice she used with clients, explaining something about trespassers on her property and vandalism to her security cameras. Her story was falling apart though, because her voice kept cracking, and the deputies weren't nodding along like she expected. One of them was looking past her at the woods where smoke was still rising from the fire she'd set, and another was checking out the SUV with its spotlight still aimed at the fence. Arabella and I kept moving toward them, our torn white dresses and bloody feet and the cuts all over our arms telling a different story than whatever mom was trying to sell. We reached the fence just as one of the deputies spotted us, and his whole body went rigid, his hand moving to his radio while he told everyone to freeze and drop any weapons immediately. The authority in his voice made my knees buckle, and I had to grab the fence to stay standing. "We're kids!" I shouted through the chain link. "They're hunting us with weapons. There's 5 of them." The deputy's face changed from confused to focused in about half a second, and he was already calling for backup while the other one moved toward the gate. Mom tried to step in front of him, but he pushed past her and started working on the lock while she kept talking about private property and misunderstandings. 2 deputies went through the fence while one stayed with us, asking if we needed immediate medical attention while keeping his eyes on the tree line. Within minutes, they had the guy from the bear trap in custody, his leg wrapped in someone's shirt to stop the bleeding while he kept saying he wanted a lawyer. Trevor tried to run when he saw them coming, but his thigh wound from my spear made him slow, and they caught him before he made it 20 yards. The whole scene turned into controlled chaos with radios crackling and more sirens coming and hunters being read their rights, while mom stood there with her phone out trying to call someone. A different car pulled up and this older guy in a suit got out, moving through all the noise and confusion like he'd seen it 100 times before. Detective McManus, he said his name was, taking charge of the scene while the regular cops stepped back. He called for ambulances first thing, then started asking us basic questions about our injuries while making notes in a small book. Another car arrived and this woman got out, younger than mom, but with that same kind of professional look, except her eyes were different, softer somehow. She introduced herself as Aisling Moreau from Child Services and said she'd be staying with us through everything that came next, whatever that meant. Her hand on my shoulder felt like the first safe thing I'd felt in years, and I started crying for real then. Not the scared tears from before, but something else entirely. The ambulance ride was a blur of questions and blood pressure cuffs, and someone cleaning the cuts on my feet while Arabella held my hand, so tight I thought she might break my fingers. At the hospital, they took photos of every single injury, documenting the arrow graze on my shoulder and the sprained ankle and all the cuts and bruises while treating each one carefully. Nobody asked why we hadn't reported it sooner, or how this could have happened, or any of the questions I'd been dreading for years. They just took care of us and wrote everything down and made sure we were safe. I pulled the 3 SD cards from where I'd hidden them in my underwear and handed them to Detective McManus, along with the envelope of cash from the shed. Then I asked for paper and drew him a map of where all the cameras were positioned, marking each one from memory while he watched with this expression I couldn't read. He made a call right there in the hospital room and sent a tech team to get the whole recording system before anyone could mess with it or delete anything. They brought mom in while I was getting my ankle x-rayed, but I could hear her through the wall demanding her lawyer and refusing to answer questions. When they walked her past my room in handcuffs, I thought I'd feel something big, like victory or relief or even anger. But mostly I just felt empty and tired, like I'd been running for years and could finally stop. The detective came back to tell me they had enough evidence to hold her without bail, and that the other hunters were all in custody too, some at the hospital getting treated and others at the station. He said there would be more questions later, but for now we were safe, and that's all that mattered. Aisling stayed with us the whole time, explaining that they'd find us somewhere safe to stay, and that we wouldn't have to go back to our old lives. Aisling pulled out a folder and started explaining how the system worked, showing me papers about emergency placement while Arabella sat next to me gripping my hand. She said they had to separate us at first for safety, but I pushed back hard, explaining that Arabella needed to know I hadn't left her behind. After 20 minutes of back and forth, Aisling made some calls and got approval for supervised visits twice a week. The nurse came in to check my ankle again, and through the window I saw news vans pulling up outside, reporters already gathering like vultures. Detective McManus went out there himself, and I watched him point at the parking lot exit while talking to the camera crews. They moved their vans back but kept their cameras rolling from across the street. Aisling explained that our names and faces couldn't be shown since we were kids, which made me feel a little safer. 3 days later, they held mom's bail hearing, and the judge set it at $2 million, way more than she could ever pay. That same afternoon, Trevor got picked up at some clinic where he was trying to get his leg wound treated without questions. The nurse there had seen the news and called it in. One by one, the other hunters started making deals with prosecutors, each trying to save their own skin by ratting out the others. Detective McManus brought me to a quiet room at the station where I gave my full statement appointment with Aisling sitting beside me. I stuck to just facts and times, no opinions or feelings, just what happened when and where. The detective kept nodding and taking notes, especially when I described the evidence I'd collected. He said the SD cards and my map of camera positions would be huge for the case. 2 months crawled by with depositions and meetings and more statements until Mom's lawyer finally convinced her to take a plea deal. 15 years minimum in federal prison with no chance of seeing kids ever again. Trevor got 8 years for assault with a deadly weapon. The others got between 3 and 6 years each, depending on their deals. My foster family turned out to be this older couple who'd been doing this for 20 years. They gave me my own room and didn't push me to talk about anything. The woman showed me where everything was in the house and said I could help myself to whatever I needed. Arabella ended up in specialized care 2 counties over, but we got our video calls twice a week like promised. She was learning English faster than anyone expected and always asked when she could see me in person. 6 months after that night in the woods, I was working on my GED and seeing a therapist who actually knew how to help. Every morning, I ran 3 miles in real running shoes on sidewalks where nobody was hunting me. The nightmares still came most nights, but the therapist taught me ways to handle them without panicking. My foster dad built me a small workshop in the garage where I could work with my hands when my brain got too loud. 9 months after everything went down, I wasn't magically better or fixed because trauma doesn't work that way. But I was safe and free and building something that looked like a future. Arabella and I had plans to meet in person next month at a supervised visit center halfway between us. Her foster family was teaching her to cook and she wanted to make me something special. I'd been saving money from odd jobs to buy her art supplies since she'd started drawing everything she saw. The prosecutor said the trial for the trafficking charges would take another year at least, but I didn't have to testify again unless I wanted to. Mom had already lost everything that mattered to her. The house, the cars, the bank accounts all frozen for victim compensation. Some reporter tried to write a book about it, but the judge shut that down fast. I kept running every morning, kept going to therapy every week, kept doing my schoolwork every day. Why does the detective immediately take charge without asking basic questions about jurisdiction or how this whole hunting operation worked? The way everyone just accepts these kids' story without any doubt makes me wonder what evidence they already had that we're not hearing about. Small steps forward, nothing dramatic, just regular life stuff that felt huge after everything. The therapist said healing wasn't a straight line and some days would be harder than others. She was right about that, but the hard days were getting less hard and the good days were getting more frequent. Tomorrow I had a practice GED test and a job interview at a hardware store. Normal boring stuff that made me want to cry with relief sometimes. So Arabella would call tomorrow night and we'd talk about her new school and my running times and everything except what brought us together. We were building new stories to tell, better ones, safer ones, even if we'd never forget the old ones completely. Thanks for hanging out and exploring all those questions with me today. I really love just wondering about things together. Can't wait to share more curiosity with you soon. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.